sequential pictures through a story because of the advancement of printing presses that could reproduce little prints and stuff like that very quickly. And then the printing presses even got faster and got more complicated in that they could print colour. And people at that same time started improving. They started improving their lifestyles. You know, maybe when electricity came in, but they won Saturday afternoons off from the mills. And they also started educating themselves a little bit better. And so they began to read books, simpler books. And it's very important to emphasize this, that it was this, we wouldn't have taken off with film had we not invented simpler stories or come up with simpler stories. I mean, the Wright brothers couldn't build an aluminium plane like a 747 and fly it in 1907. They had to build a plane out of paper and sticks and cloth and a very simple engine. Likewise, filmmaking had to begin with very simple ideas. In fact, you can still say that most American films stick to very simple ideas, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's to say, written scripts. They enhance the film with pictures, and very, very complicated pictures and special effects, and what have you. But basically, very many of the stories, the scripted stories that we know from film, were developed with printing presses becoming fast, because they printed books that ordinary people could read. You didn't need a university education to read. And very often these books had very, very dramatic things. They were fast-reading page turns. They were called penny dreadfuls, so they could be bought for a penny. And they always had chases in them, and chases are full of motion and action. And so early films started imitating these stories. And that's where they went for their scripts. They didn't go to Charles Dickens and his massive big tomes. They went to penny dreadfuls. And in penny dreadfuls, always the good guy got the nice girl and fell in love at the end, and the bad people, what bad people had to get. And always a big chase in the middle. So we've got our scripts and our stories very much complicated down, and also even visually they'll get more complicated, because people are more complicated in printing, but more simple in results, and that they started producing comics. And comics started telling stories in pictures. And that's the definition of film, is telling a story in pictures. And an awful lot of the early animators, in actual fact, were comic book artists. People like Winsor McCay would be a good person if anyone's interested in searching up the history of comics and the history of filmmaking, because he set a really wonderful benchmark for American animators to copy. Beautiful, beautiful work. And people like Randolph Bray, who set up the first studio in America, was a comic book people. And the guy who invented animation, you could say, Emery Cohen Paris, was an editorial cartoonist. So they came from that background of printing pictures. And then they went on to making films. But to do that, film had to be invented. And film actually comes from, the background to film is actually quite interesting. The people began to experiment in the ideas of pictures and how to interfere with pictures. And one of the first experiments people came up with was the Zoetrope. Now, the Zoetrope is a simple disc which has got a thread attached on either end, and you can spin it. So when you spin it, the optical illusion is created, you get one picture, because the two pictures fuse. And the original example was an empty cage and one side of the disc. And the other side of the disc was a bird flying freely. Now there are two opposites in an empty cage. When you span the disc, it created a synthesis of those two images, which were completely opposite. You suddenly had a bird in a cage. The cage is empty. On the other disc, the bird is free. But when you spin it fast and the eye can't pick up on it, you've got a bird inside a cage, which is the complete opposite of what the two pictures were. And so people were knocked out about that, just like they were in The Matrix, when they saw Keanu Reeves and all sorts of images and go, well, back then in 1827, people were going, when they saw a simple image being twisted on a piece of thread. The next development actually was the Zoetrope, but not the Zoetrope, it was the Zoetrope. And it's curious that the Zoetrope is still I should pass that around if anybody wants to look at it afterwards. The Zoetrope has got 12 slits around it, and inside there are actually 13 drawings, because they always try to overlap the last one. And when you spin it around, you can see action. And the reason for that is that the eye breaks down around the 12th of a second. And so what you have to do is draw 12 drawings a second to create an illusion of movement for a second. So 12 drawings, drawn, you can make a second of movement. Anything less than that, you start seeing jerky action. If I was a magician and I have flowers down the sleeve and I want to go, there's flowers, I have to put my hand down the sleeve and pull them out inside the 12th of a second. If I do it quicker than the 12th of a second, you won't see it. If I do it less than 12th of a second, you'll see me shuffling around here. So this is what you've got here. You spin this quicker than a second, your 12 drawings will animate. Here's the, I think there's actually 12. If you look at all the Muybridge work, it's all 12. It's all in 12. So I'm not sure if he had tweaked that out, that the 12th of a second had already been a scientific invention, or he accidentally came up with it. Or was he just following the Zoetrope, which had 12 slits? And did they know that the 12th of a second rule? Perhaps they did, perhaps I don't really know. But it's very curious that it's a recurring theme. And in modern film, we shoot in 24 frames a second, which really creates a wonderful illusion of movement. Animators start to draw, still draw, who wants to draw 24 frames per second? It's a little bad enough time to do 12, so we shoot on 2, so that's the phrase we use. Anyway, the thing of it is that the next invention with this, of course, was photography. It's the next sort of scientific, and we have Fox Talbot and all those people come up with it. But Muybridge, what's so special about Muybridge, and there was another man around at the same time called Etienne Jules Marlet, who were thinking about how do you capture motion. And Eadweard Muybridge really captured by simply sectionalizing it. You know, where does, it's pure observation. He made observation simple, because animators would have to look really, involved. I mean, obviously picking up a glass is kind of easy, but the motion of weight getting distributed by a horse, as it goes from, or a person walking from one and distributing their hip from the weight on one side of the hip to another, and how quick they do it. You can do it in slow motion, but if you try to capture it by watching it, it's just really difficult. So when he came around and started examining locomotion in humans and in animals, and seeing that wonderful, weight movement, and they're all doing things, working, picking up stuff, and all the animals are running, or different types of animals doing stuff, that he was really breaking down those observational skills and giving them to us bit by bit, also in 12s, which is, for filmmakers, is the perfect number. So these books that they're up here, the Animals in Motion and Humans in Motion, for the 2 volumes of Muybridge's scientific work, it's actually, there's a lot of animation studios around the world still have these, and it was, for someone, I mean, I use them for a horse racing thing I had to do, and I referred back to them, for just a guide running across, and I've seen lots of people do that, and you can trace them and say, oh look, I've just drawn up a horse running. So some people do that as well. Students in Laoghaire do that from time to time. So that's like with Muybridge. The other person that copies Preston Blair, who's another great artist who broke stuff down. But the thing of it is that those books are still in use in animation studios today. Of course, then we move on to the other. It was so we had actual fact motion. You could put Muybridge's photographs in a Zoetrope, which they did, and you saw them move. So you actually had moving pictures before cinema. But cinema had to come along eventually, and all these machines started coming along at the same time. Sewing machine, really fast. Before then, people had to sew, and it took ages. Now everybody started wearing better clothes because we had a sewing machine. People were reading better because we had fast printing presses. And people were shooting each other better because we had machine guns, which was a very unfortunate invention. But it's curious that when we make a film, we talk about shooting a film, because this machine it's one of these fast. So they all get that same kind of clickety-click about them. And so eventually, people like Edison and the Lumiere brothers started thinking about making motion, capturing motion in photography, trying to do what Muybridge did on a piece of plate, and then present, inside one frame, to try to do that sequentially. And there was, of course, a big row about who invented cinema and made cinema, because Edison actually got his studio together and his camera together a year before the Lumiere brothers. But what he did was he distributed it around sort of Nickelodeon-type amusement parks, and people watched it in a sort of a machine. Whereas the Lumiere brothers decided to put up a screen, and people could watch the work on the screen.